Hello, we're going to do some fractions for starters today. So remember how I've told you to do this. If you know what you're doing, just pause the video, bash on, do it yourself and check the answers. So remember, we leave the whole numbers as they are, and then we change the fractions so that they've got a common denominator. If you're still not sure about this, just go back and watch the fractions video. So we've got 4 and 3 twelfths add 6 and 4 twelfths. So altogether we've got 10 and 7 twelfths. Okay, and then we've got 8 and 4 as our whole numbers, and then we need 15 as the common denominator here. So that would be 9, that stays a 4. So 8 take away 4 is 4 and 5/15, but hang on a minute, because you should notice that 5/15 will simplify. So we've got 4 and 1/3. Okay, so recently, number-wise, we've been doing all these things, and we're on, I've said integers on there, but I'm not just sticking to integers because we're really just dealing with positive and negative numbers, and some of those could be decimals or fractions. Okay, so multiplying and dividing today. So let's just recap our rules, if you like. So 3 fours, as you know, are 12. Okay, so when you're multiplying and dividing, the numerical part of the answer doesn't change. So any kind of 3, positive or negative, times any kind of 4, positive or negative, is going to be a kind of 12. Okay, so basically you need to remember that every time you multiply or divide by a negative number, it switches the sign. Okay, so at the moment, this 3 is positive. So when we multiply it by a negative, it switches the sign. So now it's negative. Okay, same sort of idea here. It's going to be a kind of 12. And we're starting off with negative 3 and multiplying it by 4. Okay, another way of looking at this is negative 3 times 4. If you've got 4 lots of negative 3, then you can see there you've got negative 12. That makes sense. Okay, also remember that the order of multiplication doesn't matter. So negative 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times negative 3, which would also lead you to negative 12. And then negative 3 times negative 4, again, a kind of 12. So we're starting off with negative 3. And remember I said when you multiply or divide by a negative number, it changes the sign. So we're starting off negative, but multiplying that negative there changes it back to positive. So the answer is just positive 12. Okay, so just wanted to show you that this is a different way of writing multiplying and divided by negative numbers. Sometimes they put a negative number in a bracket in printed questions. Okay, so that still means that this is negative 12. Okay, because multiplying by a negative changes the sign. Okay, so this one, negative 5 times negative 8. We'll do the number bit first. So 5 eighths are 40. And then you started off negative and you multiplied by a negative. So that changes your sign back to positive. The next one, again, do the numbers bit first. So 2 3s are 6 times 4 is 24. So now we need to check the signs. So we're starting off negative. Multiplying it by a positive doesn't change that. That's still negative. But then when you multiply by that negative, it switches it back to positive. Okay, so we've got a negative times a positive times a negative. And when you're multiplying and dividing, every time you've got 2 negatives that are multiplying, they'll give you a positive answer because a negative switches the sign, remember. So like the next one, 10 times 1 times 1 is 10. So 10 times negative 1 would give you negative 10. But then timesing by the negative again makes it back to positive. And then we'll do a little bit of dividing and a little bit of powers, and then we're done. So same rule for dividing. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. but we started off with a negative, okay? And we haven't divided by -4, so that stays as a negative. The next one, we've got -8 divided by -4, so the -4's in brackets this time. Sometimes I just put the negative number in brackets to avoid having two signs right beside each other. So, we're starting off negative and we're dividing by a negative. So this is going to switch the negative back to a positive. So the answer to that one is just 2. Okay, and then 56 divided by 8 is 7. So we started off with a positive number, positive 56, and we've divided by a negative. So remember, each time you multiply or divide by a negative, it changes the sign. So that must switch that to a -7. Okay, now we've got -2 cubed. And remember what that means is -2 times -2 times -2. And we can put all those in brackets if that makes it a little bit easier to figure out what's going on. So 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, not 6. And you're starting off negative. Multiplying that one switches it back to positive, and then multiplying that one switches it to negative again. So that's -8. Okay. And the next one, we've got -5 times -3 squared. Now, we can work out the -3 squared first. Let's do that. So, -3 squared means -3 times -3, which will give you a +9. So this is -5 times 9, so that's -45. And then the last one, I wonder if you can spot what goes on here. So -1 to the power 5. So we know that 1 times whatever amount of ones you like is going to give you 1. So we just need to work out if it's positive or negative. So it starts off negative, that switches it to a positive. That switches it to negative, that switches it to positive, that switches it to negative. I wonder if you can spot what's going on there though. Every time you've got two negatives multiplying together, it switches back to positive. So that's +1, that's +1. So you've got a positive times a negative. So it's negative. And actually, if we look at the power, we should be able to see whether the answer is positive or negative without going all the way along the line. Because if your power is even, then everything's going to be in pairs, where you're multiplying a negative by a negative. And so the answer will be positive. But if the answer's odd, then you're going to be left with a negative answer. So this is only when you're doing a negative number to a power. But if you've got an even power, the answer will be positive. And if you've got an odd power, the answer will be negative. So for example, if you're doing -1 to the power 23, you don't need to write out -1 times -1 times -23 times, because you know that -1 to the power 22 is positive, and then you're multiplying it by that extra -1 to make it power 23. So that would be -1. Okay, so just remember what I said there, that if your power is odd, if you've got a negative number to a power, if the power is odd, your answer's negative. If the power is even, your answer's positive. Okay, I've got practice questions for you to do. Just give me a shout if you're not sure about anything. See you later.